Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is the 10th episode of my gameplay series of Worldwide Rush. I'll start with my usual disclaimers. I was given a copy of Worldwide Rush by the developers of the game, so I would be able to make these videos. Thanks, as always, to them. And I play a Worldwide Rush on the Steam Deck, which means there are minor gameplay and graphics differences compared to if I was playing on a PC. Since I recorded the last episode, there is some Worldwide Rush news. The first major update of Worldwide Rush has been released. This is now Worldwide Rush version 1.1. Most significantly, a new system has been introduced for buying shares in other companies. Previously, it was possible to completely buy out other companies, acquiring them and adding all of their assets to your company. Now it is possible to buy shares in other companies, so you don't have to necessarily buy the entire company in a single action. The game also provides more options to you when you control a majority of shares in another company, and when you own all of the shares in a company. Conveniently, this is relevant to what I had already planned to be doing in this episode, so I'll talk about it when I get there. Additionally, there have been several user interface changes. I'm not sure this will have a big impact, but it should make some routine actions easier. Another change is that hub managers have been updated. Given my issues with hub managers in recent episodes, I am very interested in these changes, but my plan is to test them off camera and report back in the future. Speaking of hub managers, since I removed all of the hub managers last episode, I am now fully responsible for making sure all of my routes have enough capacity for the passengers who want to use them. As I prepared for this episode, I spent a large amount of time examining all 250 routes or so that I currently have, which are currently connecting about 150 cities. This turned out to be a huge amount of information, and it took me a very long time to even figure out how to organize everything so I could think about it effectively. I now have a very long list of changes which I intend to make. As a result of this, my attitude about the routes passengers take has changed. Previously, when I found that passengers are taking routes I did not expect them to take, I was often extremely frustrated, especially when they were trying to take routes that don't make a lot of sense to me. I have since come around to the idea that this is unavoidable. If a passenger is trying to take an unexpected route and there isn't enough capacity for them, usually the only reaction that makes sense is to make it easier for them to take the path they are trying to use, rather than fighting it or getting frustrated by it. I'll say more about this as I make various changes and I can demonstrate what I'm talking about. I should say that if I was just playing the game for myself and not making these videos, I would not have spent so much time thinking about all of this. Instead, I would just be thinking through various changes and making those changes as I thought of them. If I took that approach to these videos, I would end up with long periods where I was just thinking about what I was doing and not actually taking any action. For the sake of the pacing of the videos, I do as much planning as I can ahead of time. This way the videos are more focused on the changes I'm making and not on my thinking through the changes. Of course, I do attempt to explain my thinking behind the changes, as I'm doing right now. I'm not quite sure what to do with the fact that my changing attitudes about the routes that passengers take is a result of my spending so much time planning everything out. Planning everything first results in a huge amount of additional work for me, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone just playing the game for themselves. On the other hand, if I hadn't put so much time into planning, I don't think I would have developed the understanding of passenger behavior that I now have, so maybe it is worth it after all. I want to focus on this month's tasks, but before I do anything else, there's another project that I need to do. I have been competing with 2 other companies in the United States, and part of my strategy has been to aggressively expand into areas where the other companies are also trying to expand. This has paid off in the way I was able to buy out the Culpeper hub, and I am making progress by taking advantage of the hub I built in Cincinnati. I found another place where I can do this. I feel like I need to do it right now in order to pull it off. The company with a hub in Detroit is now starting to expand into Canada. You can see there's a road connecting Detroit up to Toronto and passing through various cities along the way. Toronto itself has a hub, and has connections to many cities, including further along, cities up to Ottawa. On the other hand, there's a road from Ottawa, which is really controlled by the other company, to a hub in Montreal, and further roads east from Montreal in Canada. My plan is to take over all of this at the same time. The problem is, in order to do this, I need a hub. I can't build a hub in another city if another company has more trust in that city than I have. I also can't buy out another hub if another company has more trust. And I don't have any trust in any city in Canada. But it turns out that the hub in Toronto is actually owned by a different company, which apparently bought the hub, created some unprofitable routes, sold all its vehicles, and is now slowly running out of money. So now I'm buying out all of the shares in the company. Basically, there are 8 chunks of shares that it's possible to buy. Once you buy all of them, like I just have, you gain some options to manage the company. You can set the dividend level for the company, and when you have all of the shares, you can change the role of the CEO, which is sort of like setting a hub manager for an entire company. You can also liquidate the company and just sell off all of its assets. But what I want to do is acquire all of the company's assets. So that hub in Toronto is now mine. I have acquired that company. So I can now take advantage of that hub that I now have in Canada to create some new routes. So we'll start with a new route from Detroit. I'm going to add a train to this route. I'm going to make sure the train stops in every city between Detroit and Toronto, which it looks like it does. So I'm going to build out the rails in one shot. And now add stops in every city. Remove the stop in Toronto and add it again so it's in the correct place at the end. And go ahead and create that route. It turns out there's another nearby city in Canada, Sarnia, which has passengers who want to get to both Detroit and Toronto. So I'm going to immediately create a second route connecting Detroit to Sarnia and then to the rest of the rail route which I built out. And so I need to build the rails for both of those. And there we go. My next step is to look up to Ottawa and the rest of Canada. So I will continue in that direction. I will create another route from Toronto, stopping in every city along the way to Ottawa and then Montreal. And we'll go to Trois-Rivières first. I don't speak French. I'm sure I'm massacring the pronunciation. This time I had to go through every city individually because if you try to build the rail directly, it skips some of the cities. But that's actually only the first of several routes that I'm going to want to go through Ottawa and Montreal. Because I really want to connect to all of these cities that there are road connections for. So we'll also extend through Drummondville, Quebec, and Rimouski. Again, building out the rail that I need along the way. And then one more route from Toronto, again, through all the cities, to Montreal, and then to Granby and Sherbrooke. So I'm basically making a play for better transit to all of the cities that other companies are currently connected to in Canada in one shot. There are a couple of other connections that I should make. There are some other connections that I should make. Toronto has passengers to Buffalo, and so I don't need a train to get to Buffalo, but I should add a bus connecting them, and I might as well stop at Niagara Falls along the way. And Endicott is probably big enough. We'll build a little bit of additional road and create that route. There are also many passengers from around the rest of the country who are trying to get to various locations in Canada, and I want to make that easier. You can see Ottawa has these lines connecting to various other cities. And so I want to add a couple more routes to make it easier for those passengers to get to Canada. So I'm going to start from Toronto. And create a train route which will stop in pretty much every city that it will pass through on its way down to New York. So I'm picking up a couple of other cities in New York State that I previously wasn't connected to, and I'll be able to transport passengers through those cities as well. And then finally, one more train route. And this route is going to start in Culpeper and head up through all the cities along the way to New York, and then head north from New York through Saratoga Springs to Montreal. And there are already a significant number of passengers who want to take this route, so I'm going to buy a larger train for this route. I felt it was important for me to do all of this right now, before the other companies had more of a chance to expand into Canada, and also because I needed that hub in Toronto, and I wanted to make sure that I was able to buy that company before that company went bankrupt. But having done that, I'll turn to this month's tasks. The first task is to optimize vehicle profitability. I have to admit, I don't really care about vehicle profitability, because at this point I'm almost earning more money than I can spend. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm not really worried about losing money on routes at this point. But since I have a task for it, I'll go ahead and check some of these routes. Again, I've checked all of these ahead of time, so I'm able to go through it fairly quickly. I've made decisions. Some routes I'm not actually going to make any changes on. Other routes like this one, it turns out there are actually many vehicles that it seems like it's worthwhile for me to downgrade the vehicles so that the vehicles that I will have won't be operating at a loss anymore. There isn't a whole lot to say about all of this, so I may fast forward a little bit until there are more things to actually talk about. So here's another route where there are actually lots of vehicles which were on this route. They were all probably needed at some point, and they're not needed now, so I am downgrading them mostly to a size where they should be still useful. So even though there was a long list of vehicles to check, it turns out it's not as many routes as that. Here's a route which is no longer needed at all. If you fail to deliver passengers to a particular destination, sometimes they'll just stop wanting to go to that destination. That's what happened with that route. There's just no one who actually wanted to go on that route, so there's no reason to keep it. Alright, I want to return to normal speed to talk through this one. This route is losing money, supposedly, because this was the long route from Culpeper that was traveling all over the map. which I changed last time around to just go from Culpeper to Chambersburg, because it was carrying passengers on a long route, I had to refund those tickets when I changed the route. So now it's just going to Washington and Chambersburg. And as a result, the game thinks it's losing money. But it turns out it's not really losing money. I have many passengers who want to go from Culpeper to Chambersburg. And I have a direct route to do it, as I was just showing, with lots of vehicles on it. In spite of that fact, I have many passengers in Washington who are trying to get to Chambersburg, and most of those have come from Culpeper. So why is this happening? This is what I was talking about. Passengers have a choice of how to get from Culpeper to Chambersburg. I want the passengers to take the direct route, which has enough capacity. However, from the passenger's perspective, there are many trains with stops in Culpeper to Washington, and the passenger knows that there is a bus route with stops in Washington and Chambersburg. Some of them end up taking one of the trains to Washington because the trains come so frequently. But there's only a single bus which actually stops in Washington and Chambersburg, and it can only take 8 passengers, so the passengers just accumulate in Washington. I can't prevent the passengers from trying to go to Washington first, even though it seems like it's obviously a bad way to get to Chambersburg. The passengers don't know that it's a bad route. They only know that the route exists. Before I started checking all of the routes and really developed an understanding of why passengers travel the way they do, I would get frustrated. Why would a passenger choose to go to Washington when they can just go directly to Chambersburg? But then I realized that it's easy for passengers to get from Culpeper to Washington, and the passengers don't know that it's hard to get from Washington to Chambersburg until they arrive in Washington, and by then it's too late. The only thing I can really do is upgrade to a much larger bus. So any passengers who are trying to take a bus from Washington to Chambersburg will be able to get there. There's no point in complaining about it or trying to fight it. I should just give the passengers what they want. As I've been talking, I've moved on to this train route, which was between Cincinnati and Washington, and which was losing money. Deleting the route was one possibility, or replacing it with a bus. I thought about it some more though and realized I might be able to make this work by actually adding more stops to this route. There are various cities in the west which need better connections, and since so many of my trains stop in Culpeper, it also makes sense to continue on from Washington to Culpeper. So I'm adding a stop in Culpeper on one end, and I'm also adding in new rails out through St. Louis and various other cities on the way to Salina. And I'm hoping that these new rails will make this route profitable, and so I can keep the train rather than replacing it with a bus. So I want to double check. My expectation is when I made these changes, the train will now operate out of the Salina hub, which I wanted to make sure that the hub in Salina actually has space for it. But I realized I've done things in the wrong order, and so I'm going to have to actually put all of the stops back in. So right now I have severe traffic problems with Evansville, and so this train route should help with that. And so now that I've reconnected everything, I can build out all of the rails I need to build. All right, everything looks good. Then we'll go ahead and make that change and hope that it pays off. And at this point, there are a few more changes to make, some routes to downgrade, where again, there isn't much more to say about it, so I'll just fast forward through this again. Here I'm taking advantage of the new UI to downgrade both of the ships that are on this route. to the same type of ship at the same time. And now that I've taken care of all the changes there that I wanted to make, I can move on to these other tasks that I have. There's no change that I need to make in Atlanta at this point. I have this rural indirect traffic problem, which is that I have lots of passengers who need to get from rural to Springfield. So I will just add a bus on a new route just connecting those two cities. There are a bunch of other changes that I want to make in Atlanta and Rolla, but I want to make sure I do all of this first. And the last task is to fulfill Memphis demand. And looking at Memphis, I actually have fulfilled the demand to everywhere except for Colorado Springs, which is a new city that I don't have a connection to. So I need to add a new route to Colorado Springs. And so I've decided the way I want to do this is I'm going to add a bus route out to Colorado Springs. And I'm going to stop in Salina on the way. And the reason why is because Salina is the closest hub to Colorado Springs. And there are actually many cities that have passengers who want to get to Colorado Springs. And so they can all accumulate in Salina and go directly to Colorado Springs from there. And I need to build out that new route. And thinking about it more, I actually want to start in Memphis because I want to make sure I pick up these 7 passengers who are currently in Memphis. I wanted to make sure I got all of those changes taken care of while the game was paused because I wanted to give time to all of my new routes to actually work out. I want to make sure that all the passengers from Memphis can actually get to Colorado Springs, and if I created that route later in the month, they may not be able to do it. So there are a few other routes that I want to take care of right now because I have urgent passenger issues that I need to deal with. There are many, many passengers who want to get from West Palm Beach to Miami. There are routes they can do that, but they're just not working, so I'm going to add a direct bus. Similarly, there are many passengers who want to get from Port St. Lucie to Miami, and the existing routes aren't really working for that, so I'm just going to add another direct bus. Because all of the routes that I had going out from Miami are much longer, and by the time they get down to those two cities, they're always full and they can't pick up more passengers. And so, where else was I looking at? Okay, I mentioned Evansville once already. Come back to it. You can see there are just a huge number of passengers here who have just been piling up for various reasons. And so I've already added one train which is going through Evansville. I want to add another train, I think. And this time the train will head up to Omaha. So I'm connecting these hubs in the northwest area of the map that I've developed out by trains to the rest of the map. And so I'm going to make a point of coming down through Nashville because there are lots of passengers who want to get to Nashville and then end in Cookeville. Unfortunately, there isn't a good train route between Evansville and Bowling Green. So I have lots of passengers who want to get between those two. I'm not really going to be able to fix that with a train. But having these additional trains coming through Evansville should pick up lots of other passengers, which should make it easier for everything to work out. In this case, I did actually need to upgrade the hub in Omaha first, so the new train would be based out of Omaha, because I'd rather have it based out of Omaha than Cookeville. But since I was creating a new route, I was actually able to upgrade the hub first and then add in the new route with the new train. Columbus is an interesting problem. There are many, many passengers who are currently in Columbus. They're all coming from Atlanta. Again, it's very easy to get from Atlanta to Columbus. And then they're trying to get to various other cities from Columbus. And so, thinking through what routes I need, how can I best improve this, I realized that if I create a train route just starting in Macon and has stops in Columbus and then the other cities along the way to Jackson, this train route has the potential to take many, many of those passengers who are currently trying to get from Atlanta to Jackson and who are stopping in Columbus for various reasons to get to Jackson more easily. Again, Greenville is more or less overflowing with passengers. And so I want to expand this route from Myrtle Beach to Greenville. And I will just add a larger bus. And I'll have to give it some time to run to see if that's enough to fix that. Separately, I have an issue with Jacksonville. There are many, many passengers who want to get to Washington. Some of these are connecting, and some of them are trying to go directly. So I'm going to add a new route with a stop in Culpeper because I need a hub. And just a large bus, I hope, will be sufficient on this. Again, I'm going to have to watch all these routes to make sure this is enough. And I'm going to immediately add a second bus on this route because the first one immediately filled up. And I also want to expand this route directly from Jacksonville to Culpeper, which isn't going anywhere else. I'm going to add a second Sanford to that route because I know there are lots of passengers who want to get from Culpeper to Jacksonville and who are not able to effectively right now. A few more routes which I want to take care of right now. Monterey has lots of passengers who want to get to Matawala and also to many other cities, but before that I want to take a look at, or in addition to that, I want to take a look at Irapuato and Querétaro City, which again have many, many passengers. I'm just not keeping up with it. I have this route which is stopping in all of these cities. Even with the buses that I currently have on the route, it's just not enough. I am going to upgrade all of those to the largest buses I can, which will be the 4-acre. And I want to add some more buses to this route. Okay. Clicked on the buy vehicle button and nothing happened. I'm not sure why. What's going on here? Okay, so I'm here. If I click on buy vehicle, select the bus, nothing happens. Maybe if I do it from an individual vehicle, if I just duplicate this individual vehicle, maybe that will. Nothing's changing there either. I'm not sure why I'm not able to make this change. Okay, I'm not sure why this isn't working. Maybe I should just come back to it later. And go on to my next concern, which was going to be Myrtle Beach. And I wanted to look at this route, which is going through Pikeville on its way to Chicago, as well as various other cities. All of these cities are getting really backed up with passengers. So let me try upgrading this Endicott. And I know I'm sold out of the Sanford, so it will have to be 4 acres now. And I was able to upgrade that bus. I'm going to add another 4-acre bus, 2 more 4-acre buses immediately. And again, the reason why I'm using a bus is because there aren't actually good train routes connecting this particular group of cities. I've talked about this before. There are sort of default roads and default train lines that the game will give you when you're building out new routes. And you can also draw individual routes between cities if there isn't a better route. And I'm just choosing to only using the default routes. I'm not drawing in any new routes myself by hand. But now that I've done all of those, which were really urgent, I can come back to Memphis. I had this task to fulfill Memphis demand. I've actually done it, but there are so many passengers who are currently in Memphis who want to travel to other cities. I want to make sure that I'm improving that right now. As long as I'm thinking about Memphis, I might as well do this. So this first route which I'm building out is a new train coming from Chicago, and I'm deliberately stopping in a bunch of other cities. A big part of the reason why is I went through all this effort to build out these rails connecting my cities to Mexico City. And I added a bunch of trains on a bunch of routes. I did not add a direct train from Chicago to Mexico City. Turns out this was a mistake because the company which controls the Chicago hub went ahead and added, actually it's a large number of trains all on the same route between Chicago and Mexico City. And those trains are also stopping in various other cities which I had not been stopping in, because I've been taking the attitude for the really long train routes like this one that I usually want it to be an express route and only stop in hubs and rely on buses to get from all the other cities to the hubs, but then they can take the train from that hub all the way to Mexico City. Turns out that's not the way that the computer-controlled companies think about it. They're stopping everywhere. And really, because they're stopping everywhere, I have to be stopping everywhere too. So I added in a few more stops. And now I am adding in another route from North Charleston to Memphis. Again, it's stopping in a bunch of cities along the way because I know I have connection problems from Memphis to all of those cities. Fayetteville is my next concern. I also have Tulsa. I had a terrible time with getting passengers to and from Tulsa recently. The changes I've made already have improved that to some extent, but I want to add another train route which is going through both Tulsa and Fayetteville. It ends up getting a little awkward because the path that the trains can take, the path that the game has as default routes. So I sort of checked through the various cities that I want to be connecting with and tried to figure out train routes which make a reasonable amount of sense. And this is one of the ones that I've ended up with. And so that should handle Charlotte. The next one on the list is Macon. I have this bus which is going between Macon and Memphis. I'll just upgrade it and then add a second bus on that route. Again, it's a question of where are all of these vehicles stopping? Does it make sense for me to have a bus trying to do this route, or does it make more sense for me to have a train using this route? And sometimes trains just don't work. There aren't really train lines that are going in the right direction. So as I'm making these changes, the order is changing a little bit. I think most of the routes that I need out of Memphis should be okay at this point. I just need to give them time to carry the passengers. So we'll move on to Atlanta. So I've had this more connections to Atlanta thing a couple of times, and the more connections is connections in both directions, passengers who want to get from Atlanta to another city, but also passengers who want to get from another city to Atlanta. And so I've gone and checked all these connections and tried to decide which ones make the most sense. It turns out there are a bunch of cities down in this area, in Louisiana and Texas, which have passengers which want to get to Atlanta, and right now they can't do that really effectively. They have to take various indirect routes. And so plotted out this more direct route, which makes sense as a train route, and decided that start with a small train should be enough, and build out all of the rail. Turns out the train isn't quite going in a straight line. You can see the path that the rail is taking. If I skipped some of these cities, the rail route would be more in a straight line, but I decided I'd rather have it stop in all of these cities and connect to all of them. And where else was I looking at? Detroit, I think. I have a bus and a train which is going to Detroit. I already have 2 different trains on this route, but they're not big enough, so I'm just going to make this one a Pioneer 10. And Gadsden is another city that I've been having problems with. Its connection to Atlanta, there's so many passengers who want to go between those 2 cities that the existing routes aren't doing it. And I don't actually have a bus route which only stops in those 2 cities. And so that's what I'll do. Okay. You don't actually need to add a city. I just want to create this route. And it turns out there isn't a good direct rail route from Atlanta through Gadsden, so that's why I haven't created a rail going in that direction. Next on my list is actually Augusta. I have one bus route from Myrtle Beach to Atlanta, which is going through Athens. I've realized because of all of the passengers who want to go to all of the cities that I want a separate route, which instead of going through Athens, is going through Augusta. And I'm not always taking the time to show all of the traffic in all of these cities. I have recently lost trust in Davenport, which actually turns out to be convenient because that was the next city that I wanted to connect. And so I decided the way to do it is going to be a train coming from Omaha that will go through Davenport and then on to Chicago and then come down from Chicago to Atlanta. I'm going to go through Chattanooga because I don't have a train which is coming this direction through Chattanooga, and it turns out to actually be convenient. So I'm going to go ahead and add this train. Need to build up all the rail first. And there we go. And so there are now several different train routes from Atlanta to Chicago, sort of in plotting out which route I want each individual train to take to make sure that I'm getting good connections between the other cities as well. Next on my list, I want another train which is coming from Washington through various cities. I haven't tried to have train routes which are coming down to the coast because they end up being really awkward. But I've realized I have enough passengers who want to go this way that I do need to have this train route anyway. And so I've chosen the cities they're going to stop at in a way that should work out. The rail that I'm adding isn't too terrible. And it gives me good connections between various cities that I need much better connections to. And again, having looked at all of these cities earlier, I've made decisions about how many passengers I think need to be able to travel on these routes. Talked again about Pikeville. I expanded a bus route that was going through Pikeville earlier because making that into a train route didn't make a lot of sense. But this route, which is coming down to Atlanta from Pikeville, a train does make more sense, especially once I build out the more direct rails that it's offering me. So there we go. Again, the thing about me building out so many new train routes simultaneously is I may be overcompensating. We'll find out. If the game starts telling me that these routes are losing money after they've had a chance to run for a while, I might reconsider some of these changes I'm making. So Tulsa's doing better. Again, I have these new routes. I need to give them some time to do what they're going to do, but there's still some of these routes which I also want to be expanding, so we'll upgrade this bus route going through Tulsa to Memphis to a larger bus, or I'm sorry, to Atlanta. And there's still a few more cities over in this area. I've already added a couple routes to Jacksonville. I need a better connection to Wilmington, and then on to Atlanta. And so I have this route, which is going through a bunch of these cities, and again, it's small right now. I will just give it a larger bus on that route, and then add a second one. Because again, even though there's a large number of passengers who are trying to take these routes, it just doesn't make sense to try to add a train going there. The rails just don't go in the right direction. And I wanted to improve this connection from Mansfield to Atlanta, so I'll just go ahead and do it. I'll add a foraker. And then come down to Tallahassee, where my big concern at the moment is this connection to Atlanta, so I'll take care of this right now. Again, upgrade the existing vehicle. The thing about going from the Wyndham to the foraker is they're different companies, and even though the foraker can carry many more passengers, I'm actually making less profit on each route that I'm taking at this point. And then I wanted to come to Wichita Falls. At this point, every passenger who's going to Wichita Falls has to go through Dallas. And so it doesn't make a whole lot more sense to add more routes to Wichita Falls, but turns out many more passengers need to be able to travel on this route, so I will go ahead and upgrade one of the buses that already exists. And then come back to Wilmington. I've increased the connection from Wilmington to Atlanta, but I think I actually want to increase this other connection as well. This one just going to Myrtle Beach to make it easier for, again, all of these cities that are right along the coast to connect to each other. And so now looking at the list, I'm doing pretty well on all my passengers from Atlanta, so I don't think there are any other changes that I need to make there. So the other task that I had was this roll and direct traffic problem. So I do want to do some work on that. I do also have a little bit more work to do on Atlanta. There are a couple of cities up here, Rockford, which has this connection to Atlanta, and Green Bay, which has a connection to Atlanta. And I have these connections working, but it's difficult to control them because they're so far away from Atlanta. And so to help out both with the connections to Rolla and with the connections to Atlanta that I have, I'm going to create a new hub. I've been intending to do this for a long time, but now is the right time for me to do it. I'm going to add a hub in Eau Claire. And now that I have this hub, I can add many more connections to improve the transit among all of these cities. There are a bunch of these cities which are north of Chicago, which I'm not previously connected to, and so I'm now establishing connections. So I now have a bus route which is stopping in Madison and Milwaukee, and I think both of those cities are new. You can see there are also many, many passengers who are trying to get from Milwaukee to Rockford, and so I'm going to add a direct bus route for that. It has to come from Eau Claire because that's where my hub is. And again, just the way the roads are laid out, the way I think it's best to do that is I'm going to go from Eau Claire to Milwaukee first, then through Madison since I'm passing through the city anyway, and then stopping in Rockford. And then next up, I want a route which is going through Rockford directly to Chicago. This one will keep going. I'm going to come all the way down, taking a different path to Atlanta. Again, it's connecting some of these intermediate cities in a way which is convenient. As long as I'm building out this train from Eau Claire to Atlanta, it's to my advantage to make sure that I'm making the best choices I can about what other cities I'm going through. So previously I had a bus which was connecting Rockford to Atlanta. Now passengers who want to go on that route can also take this train. So where else I was looking at? I'm pretty sure there are a few more connections I want for Eau Claire. There are passengers who want to get from Eau Claire to Rochester, and then, but before I do that, passengers who want to get to various places. I should have a connection through Davenport and then down to Rolla. Again, coming back to my Rolla transportation problems, having this hub in Eau Claire actually makes it easier for me to help some of these. Again, the precise choices of cities that I'm making depends on both which cities I need connections to and also what routes that make sense. So I want a connection from Eau Claire to Cedar Rapids. It turns out that the road that's going to be built out is going to go through Madison anyway, so I'm going to add a stop there as well. Right. And now, the two other cities that I want connections from Eau Claire to, for the sake of Eau Claire, are Rochester, which there was already a route going between those cities, but having this direct route will make it much easier for the passengers to get back and forth. Right now, they're not doing a very good job of it. And the other connection from Eau Claire is to St. Cloud. Oh, and in the other direction to Wausau. So we'll do Wausau first. And this gives me an excuse to come through Green Bay, Sheboygan, and Milwaukee. Again, I had a plane going to Green Bay. Now I can also I'll make it a train. There are enough passengers who want to go to all of these cities. Going to Green Bay and connecting to the nearby cities. And it's also my first connection at all to Sheboygan. And we'll end in Chicago because there are many passengers from Chicago or who stop in Chicago who want to get to these various cities. And now finally St. Cloud. And again, looking at it, the road is going to want to go through Minneapolis anyway. Minneapolis has connections to a bunch of other cities that I'm already connected to, so it's worth it to stop in Minneapolis as well. But this one will just be a bus. Doesn't make sense for this to be a train at this point. Okay, once I started making connections, once I had the initial set of connections that I wanted created, I paused the game so I could, or I unpaused the game so that the connections would have a chance to run. I'm now worried that I'm getting close to the end of the month and I haven't come close to all the connections that I wanted to make. So I might end up pausing for a little bit so I can work on all these additional connections from Rolla, because there are many passengers in Rolla who want to get to all these places. I have bus routes connecting to these cities that are north of Rolla. The bus routes that I have aren't really getting the job done, so I want to create a bunch of new bus routes and also expand some of the routes that I already have. A direct route from Rolla to Cedar Rapids makes a lot of sense. I have this route to Merida. It's a destination for Rolla, which is in Mexico. It's on the Yucatan Peninsula. We'll come down and take a look at it. The only way that makes sense for me to get there is by taking a plane. It turns out there are lots of cities, again, who want to get to Merida. And so I want the plane to be leaving from the United States, from a place which is convenient to get there. And so Jackson, I think, makes the most sense. It's pretty centralized. And so passengers should be willing to go from wherever their starting point is to Jackson and then take this plane. And of course, there are no passengers who actually want to go directly from Jackson, but that's okay. Passengers will travel to Jackson so they can take that plane. I have another plane which is currently running from Jackson, which is losing lots of money. This plane is also likely to lose money for a while, but I think it will pay off eventually. Yeah, there we go. Since it's so close to the end of the month, I've paused. There are a few more of these that I want to take care of. Looking at the existing route, I have an existing route between Rolla and Columbia. It's not big enough. And there are also lots of passengers who want to go from Rolla to various other cities, and even if there are routes that are available to do that, they're not doing a good job of it. And so I'm going to add a couple more routes. Basically starting in a hub and then going to a pair of cities to try to improve the connection between that pair of other cities. And I think an Endicott will be big enough on this route. And there's just a lot of guesswork on the size of the vehicles. So I'm also completely failing to get to both Ottumwa and Chicago from Columbia right now. So I'm going to add a route which goes from Columbia to Chicago. It turns out the road route ends up going through St. Louis anyway. So we'll add a stop there as well. And again, I think an Endicott will be big enough, and add in a couple of additional roads to make the route shorter. And so that should be good. What was next on my list? Alright, I wanted to look at Hannibal. And now that I've sort of caught up on adding a bunch of routes, I'll restart the game as I'm working on the rest of these. I want to connect from Ottumwa to Hannibal. There is this existing route. There it is. So I just need to make this route bigger. And it's big enough that I'm going to add a second bus to it. And what else? Hannibal has lots of passengers who want to get to Valparaiso. And so, again, okay, no. We'll go the other direction first to Des Moines. This one's easy. deciding which bus that I want. Take that one. Yeah, now Valparaiso. And so I'm just going to go from Hannibal to Chicago. It turns out that I can build the road to make that route slightly shorter as well, so we'll go ahead and do it. And passengers will be able to get from Chicago to Valparaiso pretty easily. I have a train which can do that. And so that should bring Hannibal up to speed. Next, we'll look at Ottumwa. Yeah, lots of passengers who want to get to Chicago. The easy way to do it is just expand this route from Omaha. But I also already have a route from Rolla, which goes through Ottumwa to Chicago. So I'm going to expand this route too. I'll upgrade both the buses on this route to Farkers. Oh, okay. It's the start of a new month. I was hoping to get all this done before the new month began, but I'm going to carry on what I'm doing. I realized I should have a direct route from Rolla to Omaha, which stops in Ottumwa. There are just so many passengers who are trying to go in these directions. So I'm going to pause the game so I can add the additional routes that I wanted to add in for Rolla. And I've been sort of intending to finish before the end of last month. Since I didn't get there, I'm going to do them all now. And then Rolla to Ottumwa and Cedar Rapids. Again, this is just, there's so many passengers who want to get back and forth between Ottumwa and Cedar Rapids. They just can't get there. Since it's a new month, I can start, I have more Sanfords to buy, so I'll start using those again. And I added some trains through Tulsa. I also want to add a bus which is connecting directly to Rolla, and since the bus is going to be going through Springfield anyway, we'll add the stop there as well. And so now Tulsa is looking much, much better than it was last month. And then Rolla to St. Louis has been a bit of a problem, but the bigger problem is still coming back to Evansville. There are lots of passengers who want to go, who have ended up in Evansville and want to get to other cities that they only have a good bus connection to. And so by expanding this bus route from St. Louis to Cookeville, I'll help a lot with that, but I'm also going to create a new bus route, which is starting in Rolla. So I'd actually prefer to be starting in one hub and ending in another one. Yeah, the issue is passengers from St. Louis and Evansville who want to get to Bowling Green, there just isn't a good way to do that on a train. So I'm going to add more buses that can get there. Just looking at all the passengers who want to get from Evansville to Bowling Green. The one bus is probably not enough. Okay, I've already sold out on Sanford, so we'll add a forward to this new route as well. Okay, and I think those are the changes that I wanted to make in Raw. Let me double check if there's anything else that I wanted to take care of right now. I think I'm good. And so I think it's been a full month of gameplay, just taking me long enough to add all of these roots that I've been adding in, that this is a good place for me to stop, and I'll come back next time to look at this new set of tasks, which I want to think through the changes that I've made, see how they're working, and continue to upgrade my existing roots as I work on my new tasks as well. So this is where I say like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I'll see you again in the future. Thanks for watching.